Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to an instant reaction edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down a tough, bitter loss on the Kings' birthday long weekend public holiday game. That's a big mouthful right there. As the Eels go down 18-22, the Bulldogs is my good mate Sixties. And big fella, yeah, this is, like I said, a bitter one to swallow. Canterbury were under siege with injuries. Then had a bit of a string of calls go their way, but they dug very deep to come back and overthrow the Eels, who played some pretty frustrating football in the second half, I got to say.
Yeah, John, let's call it for what it is. First of all, credit to the Bulldogs for their tenacity in this game.
Yeah, 100%.
They just refused to surrender when really the Eels should have been driving an advantage home. The fact that the Eels played their worst passage of football during a period when they had a player advantage does not speak well of the team in this game. But more than anything, and that has a lot to do with completions. But more than anything else today, if there was ever the slightest shred of doubt that the Eels are so skinny in their roster and basically have zero backline depth, you only needed to look at the left side struggles today.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the Bulldogs certainly have a class player in Crichton, but Connor Tracy just tore Dejan Arce and Sean Russell to pieces in that second half. I'll repeat that. Connor Tracy just tore them to pieces, toyed with them. And that is just not good enough. We know, here's the problem. We know that Dejan is not the best defensive proposition in the team. Dejan can have some good games in first grade. He is one of these players who can be called up to do a job, but defensively he's always had some issues. And today, playing at centre, well, I think the evidence is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Four tries scored plus line breaks, and pretty much where did they all happen?
Yes.
So, there's and look, I'm not in this instance, right? This isn't meant as a criticism of Dejan Arce. Dejan Arce doesn't select himself at centre, right? Let's be perfectly clear about that. And then you have to say, well, what are the answers? What are the options that are there? And, they have an option of Morgan Harper at centre. Now, it's our understanding that the timing of Sivo having to withdraw from the game meant that it was going to be near on impossible for Morgan Harper to have to back up a couple of days after playing to prepare for the game if they had gone with him as a replacement. So, but we were talking about it just this week. What happens when there's the next outside back injury? What happens when the next winger goes down? Because we've lost Bailey Simonson. We don't have the wingers in the New South Wales Cup that can be called up. We were already playing Blaze Talangi, who was a novice on the wing and did quite a good job, mind you, today, but is a wing novice. So, we saw the reshuffle happen with Sean Russell going from centre to wing to cover for the absence of Micah Sivo. And there we have it. We have 3, and let me repeat this again, 3 vacant spots that can be filled. Let me also repeat that of that 27 player top 30 roster, there are players who are absent, such as Hayes Dunster. So there you go. There's a winger. You've also got 2 other players.
Arthur Miller-Steven and Richard Penasini.
Yeah,
Bowie
yeah,
Simonson.
but they're not top 30.
No, but Bowie
But
Simonson's
we
there
had
too.
offer Hickey Ogden,
Yeah.
and Tony Mattielli, who are top 30 players. Now, they're not backline players, but I just want to emphasise that they have 24 players of the top 30 at the moment. Didn't we talk about this last year? Didn't we make this a real focal point of our discussions last year and already at the start of this year? And when we were making these criticisms, people were suggesting that what we were doing was making excuses for Brad Arthur. But you know what? Here we are. We've moved on from BA, and again, look at where we are with the team that we're having to name as soon as we just get a couple of injuries. It's not good enough. It is not good enough. Supporters deserve better than this. There are 3 spaces that can be filled.
Yeah.
I'm still dumbfounded. I'm dumbfounded, John.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely dumbfounded.
I'm with you. I mean, you just look at the options we have and you look at pretty much any other NRL club in the back line, and it's hard not to be envious of even bottom-feeding clubs in the back line right now. You know, we just...
Yeah.
What Parramatta put out today, obviously Quentin Gufferson's at fullback, but if you're talking not spine players in the back line, so not Guffer on the one, there is one player in the remaining other 4 positions that was a first-choice pick in his position there. Or even, not even just a first-choice pick in terms of like your top 30, but was actually a front-line pick in that position at all, because Blaze Talangi has never played wing before. That was his first game playing wing, at least to my knowledge, from juniors through to here. Maybe he spent a little bit of time on the wing like as emergency, but not being named on the wing. Sean Russell, well, the indication seems to be that he's a centre, but he was playing on the wing now. And then you had Dejan Arce, who is a 5'8", playing at centre. So you had Will Penasini as the only actual centre playing in the actual position he was, trained for his career. So not a good spot for the Parramatta Eels.
And just to emphasise as well, if you are looking at the New South Wales Cup back line, let's talk about the outside backs that are there. You have 3 players in the outside backs who are second-tier players. So you've got Lumi, you've got
Tungor,
and you've got Mulatalo.
And that's not Ronaldo.
No. Lorenzo, is it?
Yes.
Lorenzo Mulatalo, right? So you've got players that are part of the Wenty Ron Massey Cup team in a couple of those spots. So,
yeah,
I mean, like, again, this is, we'll give all the credit that's due to the Bulldogs, and the Eels still, with all of this, still should have got the job done, because there were the game management, the errors at the crucial part of the game tonight were just not good enough. Right? But we've talked before about setting the team up for success. John, I'll ask you the question. Does the roster set the team up for success?
No, and that's why it's been a sticking point. Whether people were criticising us for backing Brad Arthur unequally, but it's clear. Like the roster is not built to compete with the best teams or even just good teams in this competition right now. And that's not to say we can't get up for big wins like we did against Cronulla, but on a week-to-week basis, it's going to be very difficult for us to close out games when we have Dejan Arce at centre when we're putting Blaze Talangi and Sean Russell into positions that aren't their primary position. So,
John, what was I writing about at this time last year?
Yeah, you literally did a deep dive on our roster composition, where we went wrong in season 2023, and how not to repeat the same mistakes. And lo and behold, here we are. And it's those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And here the Eels are.
Mate, I'm an absolute nobody, and I'm writing about how there's only 27 players in the roster, so we've got a short roster. We then go the second year with a short roster, and not just a short roster, but one that doesn't have cover in key positions. So, it's just I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going wrong. Why we can't pick up backs now? Like,
yeah, there's nothing wrong with keeping our roster spot open, going 29 or 30 in your top 30, to be opportunistic on the player market and look for need as the season evolves, and whether you want to try and recruit someone, whether it's mid-profile, high-profile, low-profile, depending on what you have to get. But you can't be going into seasons 3 or more at times when you think about the way the top 30 is constructed and players that it feels like aren't going to be picked. Players underneath that 30-man cutoff. It is such a competitive disadvantage, and yet we've done it, in back-to-back years. So it's reared its ugly head again today, and it's a shame too, because the Eels had a lot of momentum in this game. They had the skeleton to go on and beat the Bulldogs by what could have been a pretty solid margin, honestly, considering the subtext of this game between injuries and the opportunities that were afforded the Parramatta Eels. But you look to that left edge, and the Dogs weren't idiots, unfortunately. We've seen New South Wales teams not go after Jonathan Thurston when he was clearly not fit to defend at State of Origin level, and the Canterbury Bulldogs weren't New South Wales this time around. They just sent all their traffic to the left edge, to Parramatta's left edge, and it wasn't like the Eels were getting cut up every set, but there was a lot of big plays and big moments that happened on that edge that we just could not contain. And unfortunately, Canterbury weren't idiots. That's the nicest thing I can say to us, is that they weren't idiots and they punished us, and we just could not adjust to Stephen Crichton and Connor Tracy.
And let's give those players credit, because they were able to play towards what was, look, let's face it, it was a telegraphed issue for the Eels on that side as soon as the team was named. As soon as it came out what the structure of the team was going to be, we knew,
the fact that it lined up perfectly for them to go to their best edge to Stephen Crichton.
Yeah, we knew there was going to be problems, and it's, mate, I'm really quite upset with this match today. Maybe what we need to do just at the moment is to try to find some positives to talk about, because there were some things that we should probably like from the game. It just was one of those games where you knew that we were going to make some errors, and that we were going to provide them with opportunities, and there was just always going to be that sneaking feeling that they were going to keep going and drinking from our left side well, and that the rewards would come. And that's exactly what transpired. And it seemed like when they went there, we just had minimal answers. I mean, the mismatch was it was stark. It was absolutely stark. And it didn't have, I think there might have been one case where we just didn't position ourselves well for it. But those tries in the second half, that was just straight out from one player being beaten.
And Canterbury had other opportunities to score too, and they were brought back. And I think they were all fair calls too. I mean, there was some pretty offside chases, there was some forward passes and whatnot. So they threw a lot at us, and other parts of the defense were able to hold up their part of the deal. But yeah, that left edge really struggled on a set-to-set basis.
Well, what was it? They scored 4 tries today?
Yeah, 4 tries. So it was tries to Crichton and Wilson both bagging doubles. And guess which edge they play down?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about trying to find positives in this. And I think it's not hard to look at this and see that there were positive elements, as much as it is frustrating and bitter to break it down. It's just that a lot of the positives were offset by negatives. Like I look at Kelma Tuolangi, he was dominant through periods of this game, but he made 3 errors. And one of those errors was, I fought a strip, and we challenged and lost. But you're always rolling the dice with that when you go to the bunker. But you look elsewhere. Blaze making his, I believe it's his maiden game in the wing, but I'm happy to be cited if incorrect there. I thought he tried his guts out there, had some really nice involvements, showed some real class for his ability to finish and also generate opportunities with his boot. We saw good stuff from the halves, but also bad stuff. They had a complete chokehold in this game at points, and then you saw an error from Dylan Brown in the second half, giving the Dogs possession on halfway. Mitchell Moses, when we got into the red zone during that run of the in the sin bin, got a little bit overeager passing the ball inside. Sean Lane also let him down. I thought Lane probably scores if he holds on to that past 60s. The Dogs' defense had overcommitted to their left massively when Mitch held that ball up. In the forwards, Junes, Reg, both ran hard. Bryce did some good things. Joe Fingali was fantastic off the bench. Same with Sean Lane in terms of their numbers. Their work rate was incredible. 170 metres plus for both of them off 16 carries. It's just that all the good, it felt like it was pretty much offset for a little bit of bad, save for maybe Blaze and maybe Will Penasini, who I think were both very good down that right edge.
Yeah, look, I think the forwards, for the most part, got their job done well. Some errors ended up being costly there. I would give the halves just a pass mark, because there was plenty of good in the first half, and then some ordinary in that period of time in the second half where we needed them to take control of the match, and they didn't. But I mean, it just shows you cannot have a discernible hole in the team. You just cannot have a discernible hole in the team. And we had a major one that was exploited all night. So, if it comes down, I mean, who knows how long Sivo is out for? But for all of the people, and look, and I've been one of them that said we cannot have Micah Sivo in the first grade team if he's not going to provide the meters. But we've always said, and we said this when VA was coaching, and we say it again now, is that if you don't select a player, you have to be able to say that you're going to bring in better, that you have better options. And unfortunately, because we're already missing Bailey Simonson, we couldn't cover it. Now, moving forward, what happens if Sivo continues to be injured? Well, I think you have to have a centre playing at centre.
Yeah, well, Morgan Harper's the obvious solution in that regard. And the Eels were somewhat hamstrung by the fact that the Cup played on Friday. And there may have been a plan to have Dejan in the team, given he didn't play Cup on Friday. I don't think he was meant to be playing in the backline like that, though. So if you had that injury and Cup were playing on Monday or Sunday, you could have easily made a reshuffle, bringing Morgan into the team. That would have made a lot of a difference. Made a huge difference there. But yeah, again, you're now going with Morgan next week, presumably, if Mike is not available. And then what? Like you have nothing behind that. So it's a...
Yeah, look, there were changes that were going to happen this week. I couldn't talk about it because I'd obviously watched training, but I didn't see anything that had happened to Sivo. So that was obviously a late change that happened. But yes, there were things that were going to be happening. And I guess the thing is, unfortunately, that one of the key decisions that was made, and albeit a forced one, turned out to be a critical one.
Yeah.
And look, it feels tough to say, because there's if you look at this logically now, I'm feeling a lot of I'm having an emotional reaction to this loss, because you get more emotional with the losses when it should have been a win, right? So like for me, I tend to really react either A, when we're completely abysmal, and it's almost an embarrassment to the jersey, or B, when we do when something happens that takes away what should be a win. Now, in the instance today, it was a failure on one side of the field. Sometimes it might be a refereeing call, or it might be a try that's missed, or just losing a moment in the game. So I get upset with those. When the opposition is just too good, and the Eels put in a really good effort, a really good performance, you can live with those sorts of things. So I'm a bit torn tonight, because, the Bulldogs, you have to give them credit for their performance in this one. You have to give them credit, because they were the team that didn't give up tonight. And I'm not saying that the Eels gave up, but they contributed to their own win. So you've got to give them a tick. They contributed to their win. They manufactured those opportunities. Then I look at what we did and I go, okay, well, we put ourselves into a good position to win. Absolutely. You can't ignore the fact that we were doing good things to be in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, you just can't have a hole in a specific place on the field. You cannot cover for that. Not in not in the way that the NRL is played, because opportunities are going to keep coming there, and teams are going to exploit where there's a hole in the team. Like we saw that when we see it when it happens during games, when a team loses a centre and they're not carrying a back on the bench and they have to put back rowers out there. What happens? Bang, the opposition's going to go there. They're going to keep drinking from that well all night. Right? Well, we virtually were playing hamstrung in that regard all game there, because Dejan is not a centre. He's not a centre, and defending at centre is there's a particular
It's the most
skill
technical.
set
It's
to
the
do
most
that.
technical spot in the back line. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's really that combination of working with the player inside and out, and it's a really, really tough position to defend, because there are many times you are having to make the one-on-one tackle. In the middle of the field, you're often got, one or two other blokes hitting in the tackle with you. But if you're not executing those one-on-one tackles, well, you've got a problem. And the thing is, Dejan was done for pace, not in a little way, but in a big way. And I think the problem with that as well was that he wasn't getting his positioning right in the first place. So it was obvious that he was going to, the opponents, the Bulldogs, were going to work to his outside. So he was just caught flat-footed. I think in that first half, he just stumbled. He fell over, didn't he? Trying to get going.
We were bailed out by a forward pass on the flick ball during that play. Yeah.
So, it was really 5 times that we were split open going that way. So, yeah. And again, this isn't meant as an attack on Dejan. It's just fact. It's just fact. He's a half /5'8" that's defending at centre and doesn't have the pace or the specific defensive skill set
to hang with someone like Stephen Crichton.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you have to be an elite defender to mark up against Stephen Crichton. I don't believe you have to be an elite defender and I say this with respect, to mark up against Tracy, but you have to have a reasonable amount of pace.
Yeah.
There. So, and he just toyed, unfortunately, with Dejan in this game. So, yeah. I mean, what can you say, mate? It's.
I mean, obviously you want to be winning games. Don't get me wrong, but the way it unfolded at the end, both on Parramatta's side and I think with some of the officiating calls and just the general pluckiness of the Dogs being frustrating, makes it that much worse because it was a good contest. Like that was a lot of big contact, fast, explosive football on both sides. The crowd were obviously huge in turnout. It was 45,000 not out at Core Stadium. But the wheels came off the wagon on different levels there, and the Eels, they were their own worst enemies in most regards, but they also copped some pretty rough calls, I thought too, which doesn't help. Like they didn't take advantage of the one man advantage with the sin bin to Kurt Mann, which that was probably closer to a send off than a sin bin. Really, that was
that was awful.
That was almost. I mean, I know that it's not the same, you don't put the head between the legs. That was almost like a pedigree from like a professional wrestling, like the elevation into a drop with your knees like that. Real ugly stuff.
He'll surely be suspended for that tackle.
Yeah. Well, you'd think they'd make an example of it. You'd think.
Look, we certainly came out well when it came to the calls. I don't have too many issues, but there was a couple of specific calls I wasn't happy with. Mate, you've got one that you're not happy with, so you better cue the stinger.
Look, you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
You cannot tell me that injury doesn't influence the referee decisions, because Dejan Arce, God bless him, and we've ripped into him for, again, not his fault being picked at centre, but for having a poor game. One of the pivotal moments in that second half, late in the game, and did it actually lead to the try? I can't recall. But one of your favourite players, actually, and he's a good player, but the Bulldogs back rower, Jacob Preston, is running a support line for, I think it was the halfback, Sexton. And the Eels cut down Sexton, making a half break, and it would have been a turnover on tackles, I believe. And it comes back for a penalty because it looked like, or the initial call was that Preston was tackled on suspicion by Dejan Arce, and Preston grabbed his ankle. And you could tell he was in distress immediately. And it turns out that it's a suspected fracture of the ankle, and it's awful news. The guy's had a bit of bad luck there, and he's a pretty talented back rower. But it was clear on replays that it was Preston who initiated contact directly into Dejan Arce. Arce did not make any move defensively other than standing his ground and was watching the ball on the inside to make sure that the ball hadn't been passed so as to not actually give up the penalty. And yet we have all these referees in the bunker, and that was a call that came back, because the initial call I think was tackled, but then they said, "Oh, we're going to come back for a penalty." Like, what are we doing here? Like, and I know the Eels had lost their, they couldn't challenge it because they lost their challenge due to the stripped call or non-strip call on Kelma Tuolangi, which again I thought was pretty contentious. But we've got two touch judges, a main official, and someone in the bunker, and they looked at that and said, "That's a penalty." And the only reason they said that was a penalty is because Jacob Preston was clearly injured. And that's a terrible case of the outcome determining a secondary outcome here, not the actual correct process being applied.
Yeah, my concern when I didn't see it, first of all, and I had to watch for the replay, was I had a concern that maybe there must have been a hip drop for him to be injured like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like he'd been tackled on suspicion into a hip drop, which would have been an easy sin bin or send-off. Like if we had done that, that would have been a completely justified route for the officials. But that's not what happened.
No, it was basically the foot plant, wasn't it, that caused the...
Yes, yes, exactly. His own foot plant as he went into contact or through contact. And he put all his own weight on the ankle in a bad way.
Oh, mate, I have to say, however, that, it was a case of we had enough calls go our way. And don't get me wrong, I think every one of those calls was justified because a lot of them were high shots or
pretty clear, like
they were very, very clear. Yeah, they were very, very clear decisions, very, very clear decisions. So I don't think there was any disputing those calls. I never like lopsided penalty counts, even though I might enjoy them in terms of the benefit that comes the way if it ever comes the way of the Eels. But because I always look and think, well, is someone missing out on calls that should be made? And ultimately, some calls came later in the match.
And
And it
Gufferson was clearly
relating.
not happy about that because he was remonstrating with Goff for a long time post-game.
Yes.
The Fox coverage caught him and Goff having a pretty heated conversation. So, and I think you're saying to me in our sort of green room chat that you felt like Guffer didn't help the team with his conduct towards Goff. And we know that officials can be prickly. You know, if you get them offside, they will not to say it's like not to say that it's going to be actively guiding their decisions, but it can be that little tipping factor on the scale, can't it, when it's a 50-50 comes around?
Well, look, I thought there was a couple of clear strips that had happened. The one
Bryce Cartwright was hit high when he lost the ball, I believe. That was another sticking point. And, you know, there was a few things here and there. But like you said, we had the penalty count 9-4, I want to say, and I think it was 1-6 again apiece. So clearly there was a very benign whistle when it came to ruck interference with the 6 agains, because I think both teams could have been pinged here and there for that.
Yeah, it was. And look, let's be very clear. We can't point any finger at officials for the way that the match went. The match was a victory to the Bulldogs because, first of all, the Bulldogs competed hard and refused to surrender in this game and just kept themselves in the contest all the way through it. And secondly, because we made some key errors at the points where we should have been ramming the advantage home. And thirdly, we don't have a complete roster. I think I need to repeat it again because I don't think it's clear to people who it should be clear to. We need more than 27 players. And I know that technically the club can say that they have had more than 27 players this season because we've had 3 players that have been released from contracts. So we actually have technically had a top 30 at one point early in the season. But when you've got 3 spots available and there is a desperate need for outside backs, which has been identified since last year, not this year, not after players have been released, since last year, and it's still not resolved. John, am I starting to sound like a broken record? Would it be annoying for our podcast listeners to hear me banging on about this?
Maybe, but you got to think that they're sharing similar frustrations. Like when you look at the roster and what we can't do compared to other teams right now, it is frustrating. And, you know, it's not to say that we should be having representative players at all, 13 starting positions and young guns on the bench and whatnot. But, you're looking at the Canberra Raiders going out there signing, young star after young star, and they've already got a solid framework in their team. So why are we so stagnant and reactive? I don't know. It's frustrating. And obviously now the issue is we don't have a head coach. So strategically there is no direction as to where recruitment needs to go until we get someone installed and can put together a plan that works towards their vision. But that doesn't excuse what we've seen in the last 2 years.
But John, at the most basic level, you need a signing for this year.
Yeah, but
just to put people in place, because if you're not going to use outside backs like Lumi or Zach Sini, like if the coaching staff feel that they cannot be trusted on the field for whatever reason, that they are not up to the standard that is needed to play in first grade, then the message must be there. We've got 3 spaces. Can we get someone just for the 20, like even if they're not a high profile target, Can we get someone for the rest of this season? Can we get maybe 2 people for the rest of this season? Because as things stand, what if we lose another outside back? Where do we go? Like, in all seriousness, if we lose another outside back, what happens? I mean, what happens if coming out of this game, Will Penasini picks up a hamstring injury, or Sean Russell got a broken arm, or something like that? What do we do? In all seriousness, what do we do?
Wrong. You're not wrong. You are not wrong at all.
Do we then start naming back rowers to start the game at centre? Well, guess what? We don't have a Murata Nukore in the squad anymore. So, and we've already mentioned what the backline is in New South Wales Cup. There's 3 players at both wings and 1 centre spot that aren't on NRL or development squad contracts. So, at least one of those players was not a first option when it came to the team. We've got injuries in that grade as well. So this is where we're at, John. This is where we're at. I don't know, mate. It's like I said.
The thing is, I know we're sounding overly negative here, but the reality is, even if we'd won, there still would have been ugly cracks been exposed here. If we'd held on, we would have been a lot happier, but the same issues would have still been there. That Dejan Arce was out at left centre this week. That Sean Russell, who had come in from wing to centre and started to look like he was making progress towards solidifying a position, is now back on the wing. Blaise Talangi, who we hear is our fullback of the future. And look, if you're going to be fullback of the future, I understand playing on the wing for most people would be a correct pathway. But Blaise is a 5'8" / centre that is learning fullback. So it's just, it's a mess right now.
We're asking him already to play out of position. That's
it is a bit of a hot mess. And in a way, it's almost surprising that we're as competitive as we are between the result against Cronulla and even today against the Dogs, who again were up against the wall. They had multiple injuries due to concussions, and I'm not sure what happened to Josh Curran, whether it was a neck injury or something like that, but obviously we wish him the best in that regard. But they were up against it. But the Dogs also, as much as I've ripped on the Dogs, they've been very aggressive in their recruitment year on year. And it's now starting to look like it's hitting a critical mass. Bronson Sherry, Connor Tracy, Stephen Crichton, less so Toby Sexton, but those guys are all. I mean, Josh Curran, we just spoke about him there. They're just.
You know what they are? What all of them are? All of them are selection options.
Yes, exactly.
That's basically what it comes down to. All of them provide an option for the coach.
And a competitive option.
A competitive option, and when injuries have struck in positions, they've got options. And at the very least, the options are there because they had a full roster. So, this isn't going to be resolved this year unless there's action that's undertaken. It's not going to be resolved. I don't know whether it is going to be resolved.
I wouldn't be expecting anything this year.
I
know you said that we need to sign someone, but
I'll tell you, probably the only thing they were hoping for was that the Dragons were going to lose.
Would take a bit, and Lomax would get out. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd get Zach Lomax early. Well, we can live in Disneyland, in Dream World, for that to happen, because there's only one team that's continuing to lose, and it's not the Dragons. So it's, look, that's unfortunate. So, John, have you got thoughts on our 3 best players today? Because this isn't like the Dolphins game where we can't offer up players that
No,
that
the
really had
Eels
anything.
were extremely competitive. It's just that they made some dumb mistakes, had some bad calls, and that contributed against a very spirited Canterbury team who dug really deep into the well today. So, like I said, there was a lot of good performances out there that were offset by errors. Again, I instinctively reached towards that right edge where I thought Talangi and Penasini were almost critical. Like Canterbury really struggled on both sides of the ball against them. Guffo was good, 200th game, but I don't know. There's a lot of players that have had good games, but offset by the errors. So I'll go 3, Will Penasini. 2, I'll go Blaze. Just that right edge was very sharp, at least out that way. 1 point. Oh, actually, you know what? I'll go 2 points Joe, 1 point Blaze.
Okay. Well, I'm probably going to go for 3 points to Joe, because I thought the middles were still instrumental in laying a pretty decent platform, and I thought he was one of the better ones. And I had a lot of positive to say about the forwards today. If the first half had been continued in the second half, I think that like Mitch Moses was tracking towards having a presence in my points today, but it didn't happen in the second half, and that's where we see the difference then in the team. If Moses doesn't have the strongest game that he could possibly have, so 2 points for me, probably to Will, and the 1 point is probably a toss-up between Gutho and Kilmer. And I think I'm going to go. I have to go with 1 point for Gutho, just because of his sheer competitiveness, which was on display again today.
Yeah, I like that. And I think Kelmer was right there for points. It's just the errors. And even defensively, I don't think he was an issue in terms of that edge. It was just, going out a little bit wider. If I just pull up his defensive stats, maybe I'm going to eat crow on this one. 24 tackles, 3 missed. That's actually not bad. But you look at Dejan, Dejan 4 tackles, 2 ineffective on 15 completed. Who else is a big culprit there? Bryce had a bit of an already day defensively as well.
Can I ask, do you think Dejan was credited with missed tackles if he just couldn't get to them?
No. It's the same thing as I was clowning Nico Hines in Origin on Wednesday night. I think he only had 4 missed tackles to his name, but you could have doubled that for like hugely costly non-tackles. So
yeah,
and that's the case for, unfortunately, for Dejan here. And again, playing out of position, on a short notice too, whether he had a different role in the team, since he didn't play on Friday. I don't think the plan was for him to be playing in the back line. So that's ugly, that's shit luck. But at the same time, there's just baseline standards you expect to have. And I know Stephen Crichton's a tough assignment, but if you're getting cooked for the third time on the outside, you need to change your alignment. I know that we're playing up and out or up and slide, and you can still do that, but just, take the outside hip alignment. So you're at least forcing him to take an extra step out wide.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying about, okay, he was up against it in terms of his pace, but you position yourself differently. You just have to. It's you got to make it that his only option might be to try to step back on the inside, and then you're looking for your slide to come across back behind you. So, they're just in such a narrow space. It was just far too often that the player was able to get through that hole between centre and winger. It was just too often and too easy. So, well, let's let's talk a little bit now about the lower grades to see if we've got any options coming in, because we had wins to both of the Eels lower grade teams. The Jersey Flegg have now won 5 of their last 6, and the New South Wales Cup have won 6 of their last 8. And both teams defeated the St George Dragons over the weekend. New South Wales Cup winning on Friday night. And
I think both teams might have lost in terms of some of the calls in this game. The true scoreline's probably 1 try less for both teams.
Oh, look, there was some ordinary calls. That's for certain.
Macaulay Ravalawa scoring a NFL style try, I will say, and then Matt Dury getting a Maradona or Diego Maradona type hand of God moment from Morgan Harper.
Yes, yeah.
That wasn't caught, so it's goodness.
It was really low standard officiating. And then, well, John, I can tell you, in the Jersey Flegg, the Eels had the game wrapped up, and then the Dragons got 2 late tries, which there were some dubious calls in both of them. But the last one, the player is heading to the sideline and attempts to fling the ball back inside like Bryce Cartwright did tonight in the first grade team. This is a St George player. So he's done a one-arm fling, and I'm not exaggerating. The ball has gone at about a 45-degree angle, so it's travelled about 4 or 5 metres forward. It is so forward to be absurd, right? And it was play on. Now, if that had have been the match-deciding try, I don't know what you could say. As it turned out, it simply narrowed the margin. Now, those sorts of points differentials can be crucial because earlier in the match, the Eels had a try denied for a forward pass that, for me, at worst, was a line ball. But I thought it was a fine pass, so they could pull that back. They also managed to find Mohamed Alameddine offside, and when I looked at the replay, he was offside. He was maybe a step offside, but the thing was, they'd found that
and missed
he was on the other side when he was on the other side of the field, and so somehow, the touch judge has been able to align where he was in comparison to the kick, and correctly ruled no try. But how you can pick up something that it had such a small margin of error and then miss some blatant stuff is beyond me, but that's exactly what happened. So anyway, the Jersey Flegg continue on their way. They have really picked up combinations. There's a good team spirit that's there. Interestingly, John, I had a look at the Cabramatta team in the Sydney Shield, and it's full of the additional players that aren't being selected in the Jersey Flegg team at the moment. So that's where they're playing. Any players that aren't selected in the Eels Jersey Flegg team running around for the Cabramatta team in Sydney Shield. So anyone that wants to check out their team selections, you'll see what I mean there. But obviously, the Jersey Flegg isn't going to influence potential selections in the NRL. So let's talk about the New South Wales Cup game, which was down in Wollongong but was covered on New South Wales Rugby League, so we were able to watch that. We should mention that Jersey Flegg was a late scheduling change from down in Wollongong to Eric Tweedale Stadium. Obviously, the ground was in a poor condition down at Wollongong given all the rain, so they transferred the game, which was a St George home game, out to Parramatta's home ground at Granville. So there was that change, and hopefully we didn't have people travel down to Wollongong without knowing the change of schedule. So John, what did you make of the New South Wales Cup game, and are there genuine options for change in the NRL team?
Look, considering what they're dealing with in terms of the backline crisis in the NRL, and the sort of late reshuffles that are coming their way, and just a lack of depth, I think Cup are doing really well, and I think that was reflected in this game. Like, they played tough, and the Dragons are a good team. They were running fifth coming into this game, and have got some pretty good talent across the backline in particular. So they did a good job, well, I say limiting. I look at young gun Sevilio Tamalo, who should be a prime recruitment target for us, by the by, banging out nearly 300 metres from fullback. So they were competitive in this game, and they hung in to the end to create the opportunity to steal the win in the 77th minute. But it wasn't clinical. It wasn't dominant. But again, their competition was pretty good. So I don't know. It's like, I think the same people that have probably been putting their hands up for a potential first grade gig, or even a cup of coffee in first grade in the young guns like Arthur and Geimer, again, in the thick of it. I thought Charlie had a really good game, actually. So he was probably maybe best on field. But yeah, it's hard because I look at that back line and I'm not like looking at guys like Zach Sini, and Zach is putting out good numbers, but when you watch what he's doing, I don't think it's going to make a difference in the NRL. Like, it's good for Cup, but maybe not good for NRL. So
yeah, and I think there's only one position that Zach can be playing in.
Yeah, and he's not replacing Gufferson, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. So whether they, make a bold call because of sheer numbers and say, you know what, Gutho, we need you in the centres, and we're going to put Zach Sini at fullback. That'd be the only way that Zach Sini gets in there. I don't see that happening. But who knows? I mean, the if we get too many more injuries, there may not be any other option. In all seriousness, so yeah, look, I agree. Charlie Geimer was certainly right up there. Matt Arthur just continues to dominate at this level. I don't know whether you saw that try that he put on where he managed to thread the grubber through. It looked like Harry Grant at his best.
It was very, very sharp work off the boot. And you got to think...
Well, here's the thing, John. And I wrote about this. This is my concern, right? Is that it is now becoming obvious that Trent Barrett has a preference to play Brendan Hands as the starting dummy half. The decision to play Joey Lussick off the bench was a late call. Now, if he is dropped back to New South Wales Cup, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what would happen. What would be most likely to happen would be that it would push Matt Arthur back to the bench. Now, I want you to consider this for one moment. The most consistent, probably the player who would lead the points for the voting for best player in New South Wales Cup is Matt Arthur, and the thought of him being pushed back to an interchange bench in New South Wales Cup instead of the fact that he should actually be pushing for a spot on the interchange in the NRL, because that's how strong his form has been. I mean, that really concerns me, because I think it's a real possibility that that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, anyone can see that. If you've got the bloke who had been the starting dummy half in the NRL has been usurped, and the team selections are maybe veering towards not carrying a second dummy half on the bench, hey, the former NRL dummy half is probably not going to be dropped all the way back to interchange for New South Wales Cup. So you're about to drop the best player in the New South Wales Cup team to the bench. The player who is probably the future dummy half for the club being pushed all the way back to limited minutes off the bench when he's actually the critical factor in the team winning and going on what is quite a decent winning run at the moment. So that's something that concerns me, because we were just talking about who are the players that could push up or push for NRL selection. You talk about Charlie Geimer, you're talking about Matt Arthur. Well, one of them might be heading in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I have nothing to do with form, because, the bloke who'd be pushing him out has struggled with form, and he should be pushing up in the other direction, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. So apart from those selections, maybe Matt Dury, but I don't think our edge was a problem at all tonight. I thought that we got good use out of both Tuolungi and Cartwright. But the thing is, Matt Dury, geez, he runs good lines. He just runs really, really good lines and runs them powerfully. So he could easily come in and do a job. Like if Tuolungi was injured, or if they used Tuolungi in the middle, because Tuolungi is a massive human.
You saw it today too.
Yeah. So, I mean, but we have to keep coming back to what we talked about at the start of this podcast, which is that our issues in terms of the roster and lack of depth very much relate to the outside backs. I mean, we had the issue in the halves with Mitch Moses being out and us just not being able to cover effectively for him. And that's not meant as a slight on the players that were used in that position, but it's just simply we weren't able to cover for him. We just weren't effective without him. Maybe we're just too reliant on him. But whatever the case is, what is unavoidably evident from tonight is if we don't add to the outside back stocks this season, right now, it's going to be a struggle, because any injury is just going to make things far worse, because Bailey's not coming back this season. If Hayes comes back, it's going to be at some time down the track, and he is not going to be the player that he once was, unfortunately. So any future injuries,
Yeah.
your guess is as good as mine for how on earth we cover it.
And on that pleasant note, I think we'll start wrapping things up, big fella. Before we do sign off, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta. I'm not sure they always want their brand attached to a tough loss like this one, but they support us each and every episode, so we're going to give them the shout out. We move on to a very quick turnaround to Teamless Tuesday and the NRL and News podcast. So you guys will get this one up on Monday night, hopefully. And then tomorrow we'll record the podcast for the news and get it up Wednesday morning. So you can look forward to more of us yabbering and gibbering on. So if you like that sort of thing, thank you for stopping by and listening. And big fella, I'll let you take it away.
Go you mighty Eels.